All right. Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started in a couple of minutes, but welcome. Thank you for joining us. Wait for a few more people to join before we get started. Thanks to everyone who has joined us so far. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Right. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to get started. Um, we have our speaker, Ralph Titus, here on the line. While Ralph will be presenting most of the time, we definitely want to encourage folks to engage in discussion in the chat. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll have chances for people to ask questions. So yeah, we encourage as much participation as possible, and we want this to be a discussion. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ralph, and we can get started.
Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody around the world. Thank you so much for joining. I really want to keep this informal, and I really, if I can, kind of break the fourth wall, and we'll have a discussion one-on-one. Heads up, though, there's going to be a couple of little pop quizzes in here, and I think we'll be grading on the curve, so everybody should be okay. And with that, Charlotte, if we can jump right in. So what is the Center of Excellence? I'm not going to drain all of these slides. I've been on the GHSC-PSM project for coming up on 8 years now, and there's a chasm of difference between the commercial operations and public health operations that we've all been trying really hard to adopt commercial practices. And the document that I saw, the Center of Excellence document that came out of the Ethiopia project, just the light bulb went off with me, and it was finally we've got it. The operations since then have continued to thrive, and we've built a lot of things on top of it to include activity-based management. But I am actually, for most of my career, I've ticked past 35 years in mostly distribution center operations and transportation fleets. And that would be what we would call in the public space a warehouse. A warehouse is a bad word. The warehouse, it sits in the middle in the nodes and modes and holds product and doesn't necessarily function in public health the way that it should. So building on the Center of Excellence guide, we've got a bunch of tips and tricks that I've used to do very, very well initially in the commercial sector, and then now in the public sector for the last 8 years, very successfully. And if we could jump to the next slide. Awesome. So when you actually implement the Center of Excellence, it's literally it's about taking your warehouse and profiling it like a distribution center. A distribution center doesn't necessarily, its prime mission isn't to hold product, but rather to turn it. And so there's some inventory analysis. There's some things about fixed bin, aka pick slots, and I'll get into that a little bit further on down the line. And then where and how you put your product, and most of it's about reducing the amount of time. A couple of years ago, I was at the Global Health Supply Chain Summit in Dakar, and we had a discussion about what logistics was and what supply chain was. And for everybody that has a CV, you see both. But the best analogy that I heard at that time, the World Cup was going on and everybody was excited about it. And the analogy was that supply chain is actually the system. It's the bleachers, it's the pitch, even the ball, the things that allow you to operate and move goods from one end, financing from one end to the other and back again. But the real game on the field is logistics. And the logistics is a game that in the commercial sector, they play every day. And a lot of what we talk about in the winning the logistics game come back to how we can put more leverage on the warehousing, the operations manager side, and helping them to move things forward. There's actually two if we can assume the financing is always there, and we know that the funds are always finite, but we're not going to run without them. Then the next two biggest variables in running a supply chain are really the velocity, which is all about the inventory, the speed of the inventory coming in and going out. And you generally, all things being equal, the faster the inventory turns, most often the cheaper that it is. Uh, but you can't have fast turning inventory without the ability to coordinate between all of the different activities. And I refer to that as orchestration. And so a lot of what we delve into in the winning the logistics game, I'm going to get into. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to give you everything here. This is a little bit like my book report. We're going to give you enough information that hopefully you'll jump in and pay homage to the original Center of Excellence work, Ethiopia and our partners at USAID sponsored, but then also to take this guide, Winning the Logistics Game, and move forward with it. And if we could jump to the next slide. So the primary function, as I've alluded to already, for a warehouse is literally just to hold product. When you tell a procurement person you have a warehouse, they make it their goal to fill it up. I can tell you that 100% fold capacity in a warehouse is absolutely not the target goal. Warehouse management systems, commercial or otherwise, start to fail to function when they exceed more than about 85% used capacity, because you actually need that space to have product come in and go out. And hence my term for a warehouse really is distribution center, or DC, because it implies that movement and that coordination. The practices that I talk about in here, they apply in any sector, whether it's humanitarian response, whether it's commercial, whether it's public health. Logisticians are logisticians. It is a science, and we might have slightly different terminology for what we do, but we all do exactly the same thing. This guide, though, is written from the perspective that, first of all, everybody on the outside, whether it's implementing partners, whether it's the various ministries of health, um, procurement entities, so they understand the variables that you're actually pulling the triggers on to impact that warehouse. Um, we can probably work closer together to be able to help them to function better. But in reality, most of this is about how the warehouse operators, the various operations managers, and staff around the public health world can take back some control, put together their own report card, and actually drive things forward. And finally, the last bullet on this slide, I firmly believe that a lot of times I see pictures of product in warehouses with the various implementing partners logos on them, and whether it's on TV or on the net, um, we have to understand that all of that product has zero value. The only place that those life-saving medications and commodities have any value at all is in the hands of the patients at the end of the supply chain. And this is about getting it there in the most efficient manner and freeing up a lot of funds that we have tied up in slow moving fat warehouses and translate into procuring more of those life-saving pharmaceuticals. And then if we could jump to the next slide. So the once you've actually jumped into the COE and you adopted some of the principles, the first thing that we do is we start focusing on inventory turnover. And for the most part in public health, we don't know how inventory turns. I can tell you that commercial pharmaceuticals in a developed setting actually turn 11.2 times a year. That equates out to just a little bit over a month's supply. Most of the supply chains that I look at, whether it's essential medicines or program product, they turn far less than two. And that means that you're oftentimes sitting on more than a half a year supply, and in some cases, multi-year supply. And all that product is doing is consuming those finite funds and expiring, or worst case, being temperature controlled, insured, whatever, and not adding value to the equation. Um, we are going to look at the picking and selecting, and picking and selecting. For me, the best analogy is going shopping, going to the market, taking your shopping list and fulfilling an order for your home. The only difference is that you're picking or selecting. It's the same activity for a service delivery point, a clinic, a hospital, a health outpost. Um, we'll look a little bit at pallet and pallet racking. We oh, and I see Keith is on the call. Keith Hummel, call out to you. You're the one that sponsored this all back in Ethiopia all those years ago. Um, Finally, so happy to see that this has come to fruition, and really hope everybody takes the winning the logistics guide home and tries it out. But this will have a larger than life impact, and it all started with Keith. The Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's really when we operate commercial distribution centers in the commercial world, we're really it's a lean methodology where we used to say back in the day that some days you get the bear and some days the bear gets you. And what that really means is that every day is a new day. You plan and you staff and you adjust. And then at the end of that day, you sit back and you look about what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? What information wasn't exactly right? And then you get better and better and better every day. The key principles and theories are mostly to do with inventory turnover rates. And when we start talking about inventory turnover, we'll get into this a little bit more into the guide when you get a chance to read it. But financial people or procurement people, they'll look at the financial impact of inventory turns and they'll make decisions about what to invest in. That's important if it's your cash. But even more importantly, for a warehouse operator, what we're talking about in terms of inventory turnover is UTR, unit turnover rate. And that is how long things actually sit in storage, how much space they take up, even down to the clinic, where hopefully you can justify with the money that you save adopting this in increasing the frequency of delivery. A lot of folks out there in public health may not get a delivery once a quarter, or at best every other month. And right now, best in class for the most part is monthly. But there isn't a hospital in a commercial setting that goes even a week without a delivery. Most often, you might even have multiple deliveries a day. And that drives out a lot of expiry. It increases your shelf life, even decreases your costs. So this, if we think in terms of systems thinking, this is what this is all about. When it comes to picking and selecting, it's all about travel. It's all about distance. When one of the first countries that I got into, the order cycle time, and when we think about order cycle time, the time that an order is created and generated and released by the warehouse management system, that could be on a piece of paper. That's your market shopping list. It could be on an RF device, like a barcode scanner or a vehicle mounted display, or pick labels. Oftentimes in our space in public health, that order cycle time takes up to 3.5 weeks to get it picked, packed, loaded, and shipped. And in the commercial world, for any of the folks online with commercial experience, you know that happens at the very latest in the same day. And oftentimes you might turn 10 fully loaded container trucks per hour, every hour, all day long. So it's an entirely different velocity and speed, but they do that using exactly these same tenets. There will be a number of tips and tricks in the guide about how to reduce all that time, how to measure that coordination, but it all comes down to planning. And you can see the very last bullet here. For any of the warehouse operators that are online or the procurement people watching, you never know what you're going to walk into in a distribution center in the morning on the receiving dock. It's pretty much like opening up a gift. What am I going to get today, if anything? In the commercial world, that doesn't happen. In the commercial world, they're pre-scheduled, they are balanced in terms of complexity of the load across the day and across the doors and assigned. And there's a KPI, a key performance indicator called dock to stock. And what that means is from the time that you open up the doors on receiving until the time it gets confirmed and put away so that it's available to actually move downstream to the service delivery point. The best rule of thumb in many of our countries is 72 hours. And I can tell you that blew my mind the first time that I saw that, because oftentimes in a commercial sector, the product is received before it ever even hits the dock. It's actually received and labeled and taken away and put away in a matter of minutes. And so for all the procurement folks out there that are thinking about the lengthy pipelines that you have, when you don't get the product received in timely at the distribution center because it arrived unannounced and everything arrived at the same time and they didn't have the systems internally to measure that and coordinate it, that's actually adding time to your already very lengthy pipeline. And if we could jump to the next slide. Okay, so here's the test, everybody. Put your thinking caps on. Which of the following are benefits of faster turning inventory? And you should see a poll in the meeting chats. Am I cheating if I answer since I already know the answer?
Well, it looks like everyone else knows the answer too, based on the results.
Oh my gosh. So it's yeah, the inventory turnover. If you take, for example, someone's paying insurance on $50 million worth of inventory and you're turning two, you're paying inventory on that $50 million value. Now, procurement folks, they'll measure level of effort on the number of purchase orders that they create, maybe the lines on the particular purchase order that they're tracking. And that's well and good for one siloed piece of the supply chain. But when it comes to a distribution center, if they had just either split up those purchase orders into two separate receipts and spread them out over the course of the year, or created two more purchase orders and you got your turns to four, you're now only paying insurance on $25 million worth of inventory. Anybody knows anything about the insurance business, you're going to know which one of those two you're going to pay much less cost on. And then also in the commercial sector, it's fractions of a percentage of product that are expired. And when it does expire, it expires at the clinic, at the service delivery point, etc. In our world, product expires in the warehouse. That's a cost. So the monitoring the inventory turns, particularly the unit turnover rate, not the financial value, but how often those boxes come in and go out, have huge impact. When you have too much inventory on hand, you literally, for anybody that manages a work progress or a workflow, that work in progress is something like, if I can receive 10 containers a day on the receiving dock, but someone else can only put away two on the forklift, then all I've done tomorrow is destroy not only my productivity, but even further put behind someone on that forklift. And so you need that space, you need that balance to be able to make the distribution centers flow. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen in public health product literally getting unloaded out on the parking apron because they can't get to the dock because things were unloaded last week on the dock that haven't been put away, to aisles that are completely stuffed with product that was received in 2 weeks ago. And in fact, procuring more and trying to force more through a distribution center actually creates stockouts because they can't handle that mountain of product coming in all at once. The One of the most stunning numbers for me, though, and recognizing that funds really are finite in our space, is that slow turning inventory. And I think we all have to agree our inventory turns much too slowly. Consumes more than 40% of the value of goods. And that might be in expiry, which oftentimes run in double digits as a percentage of the standing inventory in a warehouse. It could be in damage where you don't have room literally to even operate, um, or expiry or excessive cost to keep the temperature cooled, insured, secured, et cetera, et cetera. There's another way to actually reduce warehouse congestion and increase inventory turnover at the same time. And that's what we call in public health harmonization, catalog harmonization. Um, what we would call in the commercial world is rationalization, but it's looking at the things that you might have the same type of product that does exactly the same thing that something else does, um, but for whatever uh, reason, you'll have multiple choices for the same thing. So, as an example, if you had a country that had 20,000 service delivery points, clinics, and we have them, and we said to all of the pharmacists and doctors out there, we would like to service office pens for you. So you just go ahead and you select what type of office pen you would like: fine, medium, heavy, black, red, green, whatever. And we're going to end up with 20,000 different items in our catalog for pens. They all write, you can all produce a signature, but they all have to be produced and procured in such small quantities that we spend a ton of money on them and they never go anywhere. We might also have to buy a 20 carton minimum, something like that, and they'll never move. So instead, when you harmonize or you rationalize that catalog, what you're really doing is looking at just the handful of things that you need, three different types of pens, etc. And now suddenly everything turns so much faster. And you can see Eileen, my team lead for the advanced analytics on the project, has popped up a really great graphic that shows that the faster you turn over your inventory, the less requirement there is on space. And if we could jump to the next slide. Yes, this is a real life photo of what it means to overwhelm your warehouse. On the right hand side, this is the inbound, this is goods in or reception. On the left hand side, that is outbound. In the commercial world, the only thing that you would have on either one of these docks, receiving or shipping, would be literally what you are working on that day. And at the end of the shift, every single thing would be empty and clear. And you go back and try to get the bear tomorrow. You're going to find how to do that in the Winning the Logistics Guide. And okay, here we go. Pop quiz. What distribution center activity takes up 70% of the total warehouse labor? They did really well on the first one. Let's see how they do on the second one.
Well, looks like we've got a lot of folks saying picking, packing, though we do have some folks saying put away.
So this is great. I see a lot of third-party logistics providers. They don't understand what we want from them, and they think we want them to act like a warehouse. They want the warehouse to be 100% full, and they think it's all about pallet storage. And so they think about reducing the amount of forklift labor, when in reality, a typical distribution center activity all forklift labor, whether it's doing replenishments, taking product from a reserve location down to a forward picking area, or whether it's put away, that's only about 15% of the total time. When you're handling product at the each level, that is called fine picking, loose picking, less than carton. It's all the same thing, but it's less than a case quantity at a time. That takes you 70% of the total time to pick and pack. Now, if it's at the carton level, which is a pretty rare thing for most of our operations in public health, that's still at least 50% of the time. Now, you'd be surprised to know that of that 70% of the total warehouse labor, it actually half of that number is in travel. And it's literally the amount of time that it takes to walk around and go up and down to get that product. And there are some things in the guide that you can do to knock out almost half of that travel time that will cost you nothing more than the rack labels that tell you where things are held and changing the direction of travel in what you do. All right, great. And if we could jump to the next one. Thank you, Charlotte. Yep. And as we've already established, picking and packing is the most time consuming. Assigning fixed bins, and you're going to see that both in this guide and you also saw it in the Center of Excellence. But here's the analogy. Let's go back to the grocery store. I hate to shop. My wife loves to shop. Sometimes she runs out of time. She gives me the note. And the first thing that I do after I agree to go grocery shopping, because I'm not going to get dinner if I don't, is I rearrange the list to reflect the order of the actual store. And this is the same thing in the warehouse. My wife will write things down as they come to her: milk, bananas, cereal, whatever. I'm putting it back out to emulate the actual store because I'm trying to reduce the amount of time that I'm in the store due to my dislike of shopping. But then also some things like when I get to the end of the aisle, I don't backtrack to the front of the store, walk to the next aisle, and go back again. It would be foolish. Instead, what I would do, just like delivering the post, is I would pick, turn the corner and pick back up the other way. And that's just the way that you have your WMS, your warehouse management system, configured. And just those two things, which is called a Z pick, a Z pick, or a serpentine pick. So if you look at the top of the racking, the way that you serpentine your way through the rack eliminates all of that travel time. It also greatly reduces that order cycle time. In fact, the first country that I did that on, we went from 3.5 weeks down to 4 days in less than 3 months. Keith, that's a great answer. And that would be specific to one operation. But I think what we can do is we'll go back and look at the actual throughput rather than the amount of time that it took to walk, because that throughput, we started off with the two most important things next to the money was the inventory turnover, or the velocity. The next one is the orchestration, also known as coordination. That is measured in throughput. So how many eaches per hour you might pick, or cartons per hour you might pick, or pallets per hour you might put away or replenish. We need to really go back and look at the increase in the throughput, Keith, and give you a pretty good amount of information on that. But you do touch on, there are two methodologies in tackling throughput. One is you hire an industrial engineer. They come in and spend a lot of money and a lot of time profiling your particular business and giving you a value of time for everything and how long it should take, which is great because it's equitable. But a better methodology, particularly when you don't have a very, very expensive and highly configured warehouse management system, is to set your own benchmarks. And that's where you measure your existing throughput for all of these activities, and you do it not to have it be about individual productivity, but about understanding how to eliminate all of that work in progress between the different areas. You cannot have high velocity and without high orchestration. And so you'll measure that. You'll measure that throughput. But I think we can come back and give us a little interesting study with that. Um, I can tell you that throughputs typically for every activity, it can be even as high as 10 times as high as what they were previous to introducing this methodology. Um, Assigning fixed bins is all about telling you where in the grocery store that product is. Um, the Pareto rule has to do with 20% of the items moving 80% of the volume of goods that you have. And what that means is that when you back to the pen analogy, if I move 10,000 of these pens a year, that sounds like a lot, but cubically, that might represent half a pallet. So I would not uh, assign a fixed bin, a pick slot, right up next to prime real estate where the receiving and the shipping docks are, but rather in the furthest, darkest recesses of the distribution center, knowing that I'm not going to need to come and get it very often. And so that Pareto rule, when you start looking at refrigerated coolers, very large cube, they might be a couple of meters, cubic meters squared. That would be something that we would sit as close to the reception and as close to the outbound as we could, because it eliminates travel time. And I can tell you that the second most expensive thing in a distribution center, right behind the inventory, is time, is LOE. And if we could jump to the next slide, I want to make sure that I leave time for questions. So this is a couple of pictures of Select a Rack, and both of them are not great practices, but procurement folks that are on the line, I'll make a promise that we will drive towards continuity in pallet rack openings. And I won't go into detail on how you get to that number, but I do in the guide, so please read it. The crime here in the top picture is that's wasted space. Now, as long as that's the same product, same expiry, and same batch, there's no reason why that extra layer shouldn't have gone on top. In fact, it should have been procured that way and hopefully palletized that way, so it would go directly from the reception to put away and not waste that space. And so if you've got 10 truckloads of that same product, you might have tied up another 10 or 15 locations in the warehouse and be full. And then obviously the one below is this pallet racking was actually set up for GMA versus the Euro pallet, and they're trying to stuff an oversized pallet in there. It's dangerous, it's damaged, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a really good section at the end of the guide on gauging and grading pallets and pallet rack openings, et cetera, to help you kind of speed that up. And then if we could jump to the next one. So as I alluded to already, this is all about a lean methodology. Throughput, what I do is not about individual productivity. In fact, the folks that work in public health in the country level supply chains have arguably one of the most important jobs in the country, and that's promoting and securing the health and the life quality of their fellow countrymen. But it is about how long it takes to get those medications to the clinics. And you do that by measuring each activity throughput, how fast it comes through, how to balance the different activities between them. And there is no set it and forget it. This is actually a rhythm that you get into every single day. And on to the next slide, please, Charlotte. So high level, some of the things that you can dig into are, the unit turnover rate, another way of measuring inventory turns, the actually reducing that dock to stock time through whether it's through configuring your pallets right or measuring the right amount of staff. um, down to you know, picking, packing, the unit of measure. When you increase the frequency of delivery, you can then turn around and do things with a system where you might top off to an inner pack or a carton, and it is literally 5 times faster. And going back to the Pareto rule, when you have a frequent enough delivery, you don't order every single thing in your catalog. And so it gets to be very fast. It leans out um, a lot of the product in the back rooms of the clinics and hospitals, and it makes it much, much easier to actually submit an order even for them. And it puts it shifts the work from a pharmacy tech or pharmacist or technician away from logistics activities and actually treating the patients. And you put that logistics work back on me, where it belongs, because my life is all about making your life easier. Um, interleaving, interleaving, good example is when you would assign a forklift to do putaways for reception. That forklift can also do replenishments at the same time. It makes no sense to drive past work. And when you look outside your window in the commercial world, when you see a truck go by, either way, if it's coming or going, that truck is full. They're taking product from point A to point B, and then they're taking it from point B back to point A again. And then we already talked about the Z pick and the serpentine pick. Really easy, probably one of the fastest things there are to do. And on to the next slide. Just we've got a wealth of resources out there, but I really still want to start with Keith Hummel's work, The Center of Excellence. Beautiful book. Activity-based costing manual. All of the things that we've done. You've heard about activity-based costing. It's something that consultants will typically do to a country. That is not what I do. I use that activity-based costing structure. I teach the local advisors where that information is every day, and that morphs into ABM, activity-based management. They are continuously using their own financial and throughput performance to identify non-value added things and eliminate them and get better. The quantification analytics tool, this is becoming the preeminent forecasting and supply planning tool through our relationship with USAID. Now also has the ability to measure inventory turns. So if you're using CAT, there's a really great turnover report by commodity, by country, by SKU, that you can start to benchmark your own turns. And then, of course, the winning the logistics game. And I really invite you all to read that. But then also, I'm here all the time. Ping me. Hopefully we've broken this fourth wall and we can have a one-on-one conversation. Reach out to me. And on to the next slide. We're coming up on 8 years since we first started this at the NDSO in Lesotho, and I could not be prouder of that staff there adopting these things. It's all about change management. It's a very linear process. It is not rocket science. It is a science, but it's not rocket science. We have not touched the NDSO in Lesotho with activity-based management since June of 2018. And I can tell you that they perform at a higher level than anyone in the country, commercial or otherwise, and their costs are literally now a third of what they were, and there isn't anybody else that can touch them. Joint medical stores in Uganda, preeminent operation. They do a profit and loss review. They continually evaluate their operations. Their operating costs, they've managed to cut in half over the years that they've been on the program. Meds in Kenya, they've adopted the same, and it's a faith-based organization, but they've adopted the ABM practices, and they've taken on literally the work that was 5 times what they'd had before they actually started it. And then we also see Eswatini Central Medical Stores is starting to adopt some of the activity-based management pieces with the daily planner at 5S, and they're trying to move towards perpetual inventory control. Another quick benefit, um, we implemented perpetual inventory control in Haiti. I say we, it's the field office. And most of you are doing periodic inventory control. You shut down. Some of you take up to a month before you can figure out exactly what happened with the inventory. And while that's going on, nothing is going in and nothing is coming out while you try to figure it out. Um, and you might only get a half a year's worth of distribution center operation. I can tell you that Haiti just finished their third year with geographic cycle counting, which is a statistical sampling at the bin level. They do a little bit every day and they find causation to the errors. They have 99.98% inventory accuracy on a financial record. So anybody want to know how you do that, you need to implement the winning the logistics game pieces first, so you can get that little bit of quiet time to do that. Things like perpetual inventory control, and we're collaborating with ZAMSA on operational improvements that they move forward as well. And on to the next slide. So this is all about eliminating non-value added activities. Probably the most important one is the unit turnover rate. Really needs to speed up. But in order to leverage that, you also need an understanding on how to staff and coordinate and execute against that. It's a very linear practice. It's easy. If you have someone who's intermediate skills with Excel, you're good. I can tell you, I'm really proud of my team, the warehousing and distribution team on the HSS team, and with the help of the country director now in Zambia, Dale, implemented this in 2 provinces in Ghana, and they were completely paper based. And they write their own report card there every single day, and you could not stop them from doing this because they know the power of this activity. I can tell you that after 8 years, the operations manager, Tajani in Lesotho, I asked him last year when we presented to the government of East Swatini and the full cabinet on the idea. When we were done, I said, what do you think of this methodology? Good, bad, ugly? And he said, it changed my life. So that speaks to the sustainability of the methodology that all started with Keith those number of years ago. And on to the next slide. And over to Eileen.
Thanks, Ralph. I've been keeping track of some of the questions in the chat. Feel free to keep adding them. But to get started, I guess there was a lot of advice in this presentation. So if you have a limited budget or a limited capacity, you want to start from just taking 1 or 2 aspects from these 2 guides to get started. Where would you recommend to start?
What a great question. I learned a long time ago that if you take any one activity and improve it, you first have to realize that a distribution center operates like a slow moving assembly line. You might have the first step receiving, the next step might be quality control, the next step might be put away, the next step might be replenishment, and it moves on and on and on. The easiest thing to be the most impactful is to just label your bin locations, your warehouse locations, to support ZPIC, to support Serpentine, which is nothing more than paying for the bin labels. But the issue with that is you will become so fast, so quick at it, that you're going to need to be prepared to get a lot better on packing and consolidating on the loading dock and etc. So instead, step through this with a little bit of improvement all at the same time. And the place to start with is implement a daily planner. And what that means is you take the information that you have about what's going to happen tomorrow, whether that's receiving or picking and packing or whatever it is, and you start to benchmark the throughput. How many widgets per hour are being picked and packed or pallets put away or replenished? Most of those things exist in your WMS already. Some of them might be paper based, like a receiving schedule. And nothing is 100%, right? If you can only get 80% of the information, you're still exponentially farther along than what you were before. And so you take the information that you have and you use it and you drive forward. I hear, wait, let's not do this because we have a new WMS coming next year. Or they're building us a new warehouse and it's going to be done in 2 years. Or we just got a new leadership staff and it's all but. Don't wait. Start where you are, move forward, and better tools will come along as you implement them. And keep in the back of your mind that this really is a science. There is a warehouse science. And I always go to Georgia Tech as my source for a lot of great information. And in reality, I've only got one sticking point with the professors there and me and the way that I operate either a distribution center or a transportation fleet is they often look at the quantity of movement as the benchmark, and I don't. I use the quantity of movement and times the cubic value of that product. So I know literally how much time and space these things are impacting me. But all of this is my motive is to find a way to exponentially increase selectively the frequency of delivery to each one of these health outposts. Right now, because it is so infrequent, we sit on a lot of stock in the hospitals and it expires at the same time that we have stock outs at clinics because it's sitting at the hospital, right? Next. And
Thanks. All right.
absolutely, you're right. This is about respect for those that are working in the warehouse. Absolutely.
Great. We got some great questions from Asha Barshilia, and apologies if I've mispronounced. Um, they were asking if they were trying to work through what the variation is between public health and commercial commodity supply timing. Is it due to weaker human resources, infrastructure, due to weaker capital investment, due to long paperwork and super long processes? So I think this really wraps up into what are the barriers to success or the extra challenges or hurdles in our supply chains, and what are the processes or tools that can help them overcome those?
Another fantastic question. And there is, I coined this term a long time ago. There's this disease called distributionitis, and you find it in people that work in the warehouse. And when you ask them what their job is, they'll say, I am the Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 4 receiving clerk, or I am the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday put away stand up forklift driver. And after enough of these stories, I diagnose them with distributionitis and I tell them, actually, no, your job is the same as the receiving clerk's job, as the custodian's job, as my job. And that's to put those life saving commodities in the hands of the patient as quickly and as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible. And so you have to break that paradigm that a warehouse, a distribution center is not an office. There must be something produced and measured. And so when you start to measure those activities, you're going to start to see where your bottlenecks are. And I can tell you for a resource, you have to read the book. It's all about constraints, right? And when you understand that, then you start to take back some control. That's internally. Externally, for those of you that have some influence or your primary activity is procurement, um, it doesn't do any good to order 50 containers of product to be received unannounced on a Monday at the warehouse and then get upset when it's not in the system at the end of the week. Um, in the commercial world, most purchase orders do not trip past a single container. You might have multiple purchase orders on a container, but you won't go past a single container. And that's because most warehouse management systems, when you pop the door on that container and you systematically open it up, until every single thing is accounted for on all 50 of those containers, nothing is going to happen. And you have literally destroyed the operational capacity of that warehouse until that's cleared up and cleared through. So it's all about actually understanding S&OP, sales and operations planning. Ethiopia, the field office, actually got certified in that a couple of 3 years ago, but it means that every decision about everything that's coming downhill in the supply chain, everyone has to have a seat at the table. And that means procurement people have to talk to the client, they have to talk to the transport people, the warehousing, all the way down to the service delivery point people to be informed and to get the feedback, just like lean, just like plan, do, check, act, to let them know that it's coming, to be prepared, or maybe it doesn't work out and they need to change their plans. So absolutely great question. Do we have time for one
Great.
more?
I think so. Yeah, we've got 5 minutes left. So um, I'm going to go with this one. So Jerry McGuire said, "Show me the money." Ralph mentioned I'm the head of the advanced analytic team. So my mantra is show me the data. Can you talk can you talk a little bit about the importance of data and the different types of WMS systems used in our public health supply chains and how this can make the strategies described either easier or in some cases maybe even harder?
Wow, that's great. You hit my trigger point, Bill. The the way that we catalog and move things around the world, we tend to handle things at a generic item, right? And that means paracetamol, 500 milligram. Everybody manufactures it. Everybody has different units of measure for their own. In fact, they have multiple units of measure for their own product, and they all have individual barcodes for them. And until we start using this, we're not going to have that universal key to translate all of the different languages. And so we spend a ton of time collectively, all of us, in analyzing data that we don't have to. When we handle things at the G10 level, at the global trade identification level, number level, we start to get transparency in the inventory. In fact, we start to see what the unit turnover rate actually is. And in fact, in those, along with those G10s, those barcodes, there will be attributes associated. And those attributes can be something like, what's the volume of that particular item? And then we can start to see how full we are, why we need to increase the frequency of delivery, why we need to increase the unit turnover rate, um, etc. Did I answer that completely? The
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like the next guide needs to be around visibility and data in your
well,
warehouse.
so I can tell you that as a first of all, we would never use percentage of the value of goods to remunerate for services in the private sector. We wouldn't. We would know what that number is. In other words, if it's 6% of the cost of goods to receive and store and deliver, um, we might present that to the customer that we're doing that for, but we know what costs make up all of that underneath that. We would never price it that way. In various commodities, in groceries right now, we hear all this stuff about price gouging, but I can tell you that the margins are tend to be low. I'm not saying whether it happens or it doesn't, but the margins are low. But all in, you might see 1% to 1.5% of the value of goods to do all supply chain activities at the country level. And groceries in general are cheap, they're inexpensive, right? And so that tells you the level of efficiency that comes out. And thankfully, the first 12 years of my supply chain career were spent in the grocery business and a very good operation. At the time, we were the third largest in the country in the U.S., but we made more profit than number one and number two. Don't get hung up on the profit word because it translates really well into the public health and its value. Because the more money that I can save on the back end on being efficient and fast, the more money you can spend on pharmaceuticals. But in many of our spaces, first of all, our public health operators don't know what their supply chains cost. Some of them are double digits, right? And so there's a lot of room for efficiency, but most of that is in just the facilities. So this is not about labor. This is about making things easier and faster. Great question. All right.
All right.
I think that's all the time we have for questions. I'm going to post one more that we didn't get to in the chat, Ralph, so you can respond after the meeting.
Great. Fantastic.
And over to you, Charlotte.
Great. I will leave the meeting going for a little bit so that people will still have access to the chat, but we'll also, if there are any questions we weren't able to answer, we can, during the presentation itself, we can respond and share those responses with folks who registered along with the resources after the meeting. So look out for that in your emails. And thank you everyone so much for a great discussion. Thank you, Ralph, for your expertise and sharing all of this experience. And yeah, we're at time. Any closing words from you, Ralph?
You guys, the group asked some really pointed and educated questions. So I'm really excited, looking forward to you guys, the feedback that you get from this book and the success stories that I'm sure you're going to enjoy in the very near future. Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte, for putting this together. I'll finish with this. I've got 30 plus folks, subject matter experts in supply chain on my bench that work for me. I tell them all the time that you can do the greatest technical assistance in the world, but if there's no one there to tell the story, it didn't happen. And Charlotte makes it happen. So thank you, Charlotte, to you and the whole comms team.
Thank you, Ralph. All right. Well, everyone have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll follow up with email, and feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn too if we want to keep the discussion going.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.